Hello everyone, welcome to the first episode of my AI series. Today we'll try to answer the question, can AI be fair? By discussing the problem of algorithmic bias. Take a moment and imagine that you are an highly qualified job seeker. You have got the experience, the skills, and you've made lots of applications, but you keep getting rejected. There is a high chance that an AI resume screener is responsible for your distress, which begs the question, is algorithmic bias holding us back? This is just one example of how algorithmic bias in AI impacts our lives. It's fair to say, AI shouldn't detect your opportunities, yet this possibly unfair discrimination is happening. In this video, we'll discuss algorithmic bias, its real-world consequences, why it happens, potential solutions, and what we can do about it, if anything. Algorithmic bias. So, what is algorithmic bias? Algorithmic bias refers to any kind of bias that arises from any algorithmic decision making. It could be simple or complex algorithms, it doesn't matter. This is often unintentional but reflects issues that are present in our society. For instance, imagine a teacher unknowingly favoring a certain student. This is similar to the AI because the AI learns similar biases if its data is unbalanced. Basically, you get what you put in. Put in a biased input, you get a biased output. In this video, I'll be using the term AI bias and algorithm bias interchangeably. In the context of AI, they mean the same thing. Like the case mentioned earlier about the AI resume screeners, this is just an example of how AI bias affects my life. These are real problems impacting real people, hence real-world consequences. There are wide ranges of areas where algorithmic bias causes real-world harm and issues. We'll focus on three impactful areas: the criminal justice system, the healthcare system, and the finance system. Let's look at a case of bias occurring in an algorithm used to predict future criminals. We'll look at a case of Burdine and Prater, a case of wrong future risk assessment. This is an article by ProPublica, and in this article, it tells the story of Burdine, an 18-year-old with a friend who was charged for petty theft. After being reported for attempted theft for a bicycle and scooter, which cost a total of about $80. Then comparing this crime to another case of Vernon Prater, a 41-year-old, who is a more seasoned criminal, already convicted of armed robbery and served 5 years, who was charged for shoplifting, which cost about 86.35 cents. Burdine and Prater case is a good example of criminal assessment going wrong, because something interesting happened when Burdine and Prater were booked into jail. A computer program spat out a score predicting the likelihood of each committing future crime. Burdine, who was black, that's the 18-year-old girl, was rated a high risk, while Prater, who is white, was rated a low risk. 2 years later, we found out that the computer algorithm got it exactly wrong. Burdine had not been charged with any new crimes, and Prater is serving an 8-year prison sentence subsequently for breaking into a warehouse and stealing $1,000 of electronics. So this is an example of how criminal risk assessment algorithms are used to inform decision about who can be set free at every stage of criminal justice system. from assigning bonds amount, as in the case of Borden and Prater, to even more fundamental decisions about defendant freedom. Let's look at more stats from the article. So ProPublica obtained risk assessment score assigned to about 7,000 people arrested in Broward County, Florida in 2013 and 2014, and checked to see how many were charged with new crimes over the next 2 years. The same benchmark used by the creators of the algorithm. The score proved remarkably unreliable in forecasting violent crime. Only 20% of the people predicted to commit violent crimes actually went on to do so. Then when a full range of crimes were taken into account, like misdemeanors, driving with expired license, and so on and so forth, the algorithm was somewhat more accurate than a coin flip. Of those deemed likely to reoffend, 61% were arrested for any subsequent crime 2 years later. So this is just an example of impact of algorithmic bias, right, in the criminal justice system. Moving on to healthcare. AI is used for diagnosis could be less accurate for certain demographic. Let's explore an article from the Washington Post about racial bias in medical algorithm. In this case, this algorithm predicts which patients will benefit from extra medical care, and it was found to vastly underestimate the health needs of the sickest Black patients, amplifying long-standing racial disparities in medicine. If you look at some stats, right, in the article, so after some analysis were done, right, for more broader national data of about 3.7 million patients, it was found that Black patients, equally ranked with white patients in the need of extra care, were actually more sicker. So there's something to note here, because it might seem intentional, right? But all evidence points to the fact that this algorithm wasn't intentionally racist. In fact, it explicitly excluded race, which shows how persistent the issue of AI bias is. We'll address more on this later. So this is another case of like healthcare, algorithm bias impact in healthcare, which leads to more sicker Black patient missing their desired health care that they need for their sickness. Moving on to finance. So AIs are considered for loan approvals, mortgage approval, credit scores, targeted predatory lending, and so on. If you look at the case of a couple that were denied mortgage due to their race also. So in this case, this couple were denied mortgages, right, despite qualifying meeting most of the qualifying criteria. So in this case, Crystal, Maria, and Eska's dream was to own a personal home. They applied for a mortgage for a new 4-bedroom flat or house. They went through the pre-qualifying stage easily. After having saved more than the required for the down payment, suddenly they were denied, right? The loan officer, suddenly they were denied. The loan officer told the couple that they submitted the application internally over a dozen of time, and they got no each time, and it seemed that it was getting rejected by an algorithm. So the excuse given was that she was a contractor, which doesn't hold true, because our fellow colleagues at work were also contractors, and they got approval. If you look at the stats, it was estimated that after like analyzing over 2 million conventional mortgage applications for homes, we found that like 40% were more likely to turn down Latinos for loans, 50% more likely to turn down Asians, 70% more likely for Native Americans, and 80% for blacks. So these few examples are just one of the multitude of examples how that shows the real world consequences of AI bias. Now, why does algorithmic bias happen? All the previous example highlights the real world consequences and seriousness of AI bias. It's a huge issue that needs addressing. So why does algorithmic bias happen? One example is the bias data set. Bias data, which personally I think makes up most of the bias that happens. Basically, AI models rely heavily on data sets. So if the data set don't represent diverse populations, algorithms will reflect this limitation. For example, let's take a look at a TEDx talk by Joy Bolamini on fighting algorithmic bias.
Why isn't my face being detected? Well, we have to look at how we give machines sight. Computer vision uses machine learning techniques to do facial recognition. So how this works is you create a training set with examples of faces. This is a face, this is a face, this is not a face. And over time, you can teach a computer how to recognize other faces. However, if the training sets aren't really that diverse, any face that deviates too much from the established norm will be harder to detect, which is what was happening to me. But don't worry, there's some good news.
So in the video, she highlights how the lack of diverse data sets was the source of bias in the inability of the AI algorithm to recognize her face. Another case is historical injustices. So one of the popular examples of this is zip code data may reflect decade-old redlining practices. Another source of algorithmic bias is the algorithmic design. The way the algorithm is built can introduce or amplify bias. And this is usually sometimes overlooked. For example, oversimplification of the model, right, in training the data may make it inefficient, and make inefficient to process like subtle context that might be crucial in mitigating biases. Another example, right, is the unconscious developer bias. Developers may unknowingly design algorithms that propagate their bias, their bias. So this is also very common. For example, if let's say the user or the developer is limited in terms of the exposure to only a specific demographic, that might flow into the design of the algorithm and unconsciously isolating or neglecting a whole other demographic. Another source of algorithmic bias is lack of transparency. In AI black box problem makes identifying and correcting biases very difficult. So in this article by yours truly, I'll drop the link in the description. It explains the black box. It explains the black box mixture of AI, which is a term used for complex AI models. As because of this complexity, it makes it very difficult to explain or understand how these models, deep learning models, arrive at specific decisions. So these complex models are called black boxes. So it is very encouraged, especially in AI transparency, to try and avoid black boxes whenever possible, because they are a very huge source of AI algorithm bias, especially in very complex models in like deep learning. So what can we do about it? Quite frankly, there isn't a single solution or answer to this problem. Addressing this problem is very complex. Addressing this very complex issue requires very diligent and ongoing effort by every member of the society. However, there are promising approaches that we can look at. For one of the most important one is to actively seek out diverse data sets to train AI system. As mentioned earlier, right, AI models rely heavily on data sets. The more diverse the data set it is trained on, the better it performs. The better it performs to unknown data and gives out more realistic and unbiased results. We should actively seek out the diverse data sets to train AI systems. However, I myself will acknowledge that it may be time consuming and costly, but this is not an excuse to bypass this process, because it's going like I mentioned, in terms of real world consequences, biases have real world consequences to people's life. Another solution is following an ethical framework that promotes fairness and non-discrimination. One of such principles is the Google AI principle. While we're optimistic about the potential, we recognize the advanced technologies can raise important challenges and must be addressed thoughtfully and affirmatively. So, if you look at this, be socially beneficial is one of the principles. Avoid creating or reinforcing unfair bias. So AI algorithms and data sets can reflect and reinforce or reduce unfair bias. We recognize that distinguishing fair from unfair bias is not always simple. So, which differs across culture and societies. This highlights the complexity of the problem we are discussing here. So, having this, these principles and ethical frameworks will serve as a guide, and it's very useful in mitigating unconscious developer biases. The problem of unconscious is very useful in mitigating the problem of unconscious developer biases. Same challenges, it can be time consuming and costly. Then so another solution is regulation and oversight. Governments have the responsibilities to give out policies and regulations in providing accountable AI system. If you look at the Asiloma AI principles, which are 23 guidelines for research and development of artificial intelligence, right? You can check out this. It talks about ethic values, research issues that you're interested in, longer term issues to look at, right? So this is one example of a combination of ethical principles and regulations and oversight. Another example of this is the European Union Ethics for Trustworthy AI. This is another example of government encouraging development of trustworthy AI. So if you look at this, EU, they have a bunch of policies that you can look at in developing trustworthy AI. Practicing AI transparency via explainability and interpretability. So if you look at the post, the article by myself, I'll drop the link in the bio, in the description. I highlighted the importance of AI explainability and interpretability. So basically, explainability provides clear reasons for the AI output or decisions, right? It becomes more difficult to read. As models get complex, the black box, it becomes very difficult to understand the inner workings of the model. It becomes more difficult to predict output from inputs. Explainability helps to build trust by deconstructing black boxes. So, for example, a customer interacting with chatbots asking about a billing discrepancy is explainable if the chatbot provides a specific action with a brief explanation of the steps it took to reach that decision. Now, interpretability explains the relationship between the inputs and the outputs of AI model. So, both of these combine together to increase AI transparency, which mitigates AI biases and enables earlier detection of biases. So, what can we do? Simply put, for me, is don't just consume, ask questions. This is very important in tackling AI bias. So it's not, don't just consume like AI products, question how this AI is used in their life, and also support responsible development. There are also various organizations that focuses on addressing issues of algorithmic bias, like the Spotlight organization. You can see a list of organizations that are like that advocates the creation of ethical AIs, basically, right? So you can check them out and see anyone that interests you. Another one is the AI Government Alliance, which addresses various issues with various AI issues, algorithmic bias inclusive. So the AI government is transforming how artificial intelligence shapes our world. Our work goes beyond governance and driving. We ensure to enhance, foster inclusive growth, which is keyword, and promote global prosperity. So these are good organizations to look into. So now that we have looked extensively into the problem of algorithmic bias, we can revisit our earlier questions. Can AI be fair? Personally, I believe it can be, but it will require a combined societal effort to bring about this outcome. What do you think? Leave your comment and please subscribe for more AI videos. Thank you for listening.